Hey, what's up guys? This is the second part of the lesson 2.5 solving equations involving absolute values. So once again, part 2. In the last video, I show you guys what is an absolute value when you look at the number line. So we know that the absolute value of -8 is +8 and the absolute value of +8 is +8 because it's the distance from 0 on the number line to the specific number inside of the absolute value. Now I gave you guys also a question on the previous video. When you have the absolute value of a number, you don't know what the number is, but we know the answer is 9. Well, that number can either be a -9 because the absolute value of -9 is +9, and the absolute value of +9 is also +9. So this here, the number that goes inside of the absolute value can either be a -9 or a +9. So when we solve equations involving absolute values, or in other words, we are solving absolute value equations, we're going to have to make two different cases. One with the negative case and the second one with the positive case, so we can actually cover what can happen inside of the absolute value. And we can also graph our solution, our answers, on a number line. So when we know what number goes inside of the absolute value, we can actually plot it. Just put a point. For example, this one here, we have a -8. You just put a point on top of that number on the number line. So that's what we're going to do on this video. We are going to solve absolute value equations, and then we are going to graph the solution on a number line. So look at these examples here. We want to solve the equation and then graph the solution. So we have absolute value with an equal sign. We have an equation, and I'm going to go to the one on the left side here, the absolute value of n minus 3 equals 5. So what we have to do here to solve, we need to make two different cases, because that number here, we don't know what this number is, but we need to find what that value is. But we have two options. The number inside of the absolute value, and I'm looking at this whole thing inside, has to be a negative number, which can be 5, or it can be also a -5. So we're going to do our two cases. So the way we set up our two cases, I have a negative case on the left side and a positive case on the right side. We are going to take what's inside of the absolute value. We're not going to use those vertical lines anymore. I'm just going to copy what's inside, n minus 3, and I'm going to equal that to a negative number from this side. So that'll be a -5. And let me explain why we use a -5 here. Because if you think about it, if you put a -5 here, the absolute value of -5 is 5. So this number can go inside of the absolute value. But we also have another option, a positive case. So to set up your positive case, you're going to take what's inside of the absolute value. You just copy down what it's inside, and you're going to equal that to a +5. So this number inside of the absolute value can be +5. Then it's going to give you guys an answer of +5. So those are my two cases, a negative case and a positive case. Now we need to solve for the variable. And you have to understand what type of equations we are solving. This one here is an absolute value equation. We have absolute value, and we want to find the value of the variable. When we make our two cases, one negative and one positive, we actually have linear equations. Two linear equations. So once we have those two linear equations, you just go back to those linear equations and you guys solve for the variable. So I'm going to draw the line under the equal sign. I'm going to do the opposite of the constant on the same side of the variable. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. This cancels. So I have n on one side and -2 on the other side. So n equals -2 for the negative case. That is the value of the variable. For the positive case, I'm going to do the line under the equal sign. I'm going to add 3 to both sides, which is the opposite of the constant. A minus opposite is plus. I'm going to cancel those 3's right there. And when I cancel, I'm going to get n on one side and 8 on the other side. So n equals positive 8. Now in mathematics, there's a way we can actually write down our answers when we have plural, more than one answer. We can put it what is called a solution set. So a solution set is just brackets. You guys can make brackets like this. You put one of the answers, comma, and the second answer, and then you close the brackets. Do not use parentheses, because if you guys use parentheses, that's going to look like an order paired, and we're going to talk about plotting points later on. So do not use parentheses. We have to use brackets. It's always nice to write your answers from least to greatest, so the smallest number on the left side and the greatest number on the right side. So my answer sets, my two answers are -2 and +8. Now, they say to also graph your solutions. So we have two solutions, two answers. So on the number line, you're just going to make one number line here. I'm going to put the 0 in the middle. And for me, in my classroom, you don't have to actually label all the units in the number line. You just have to tell me where the solution will be on the number line. So for example, we do have a -2 here. So I know my answer has to be on the left side of the 0. Those are the negative numbers. -1 is here, -2 is right here. So I'm going to put -2 right there, and I'm going to make a circle. That's what we do. We actually plot the solution with the circle, closed or dark circle. Then you guys have a +8. So I know my +8 is on the right side, and I'm just going to go to +8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm just going to say right here is my +8. And I'm going to make a dot or a closed circle on top of that number. So my graph of the number line is all of this right here, and my solution set is right here. And that's what we want. We want two things. One is my solution, so I have a solution set, and the second thing is the graph. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this one here. We have the absolute value of 2h plus 3 equals 11. So we have an absolute value equation. I'm going to set up my two cases, one negative, one positive, and then I'm going to make two linear equations. So I already have my two cases here. Notice that I abbreviated negative and positive. You guys can do that. But for the negative case, I have what's inside of the absolute value, 2h plus 3 right here. And this number, I turn it into negative. Over here, same thing, 2h plus 3, but I keep this number in positive, as positive number. Now we need to solve each equation. So I am going to draw the line. I'm going to do the opposite of the constants right here. So those 3's cancel. I bring down the 2h, and I get -14 on this side. I'm going to divide by 2. This turns into +1. So h equals -7. So that's one of my solutions. And my second solution, let's go to the positive case. I do the line under the equal sign. I subtract 3 from both sides. I cancel the 3's. I bring down the 2h, and that's going to be +8 on the right side, 8 minus 3. 11 minus 3 is 8. And then I divide by 2 over here. So this turns into +1. So h equals +4. So my solution set, remember you always want to start with the lowest number. So -7 is smaller than +4. And you have comma 4, and we have our brackets. So that is the solution set. You guys have two answers, -7 and +4. Now you guys are going to graph your solution. So you guys will have your number line here, and you guys have your 0 in the middle. I'm going to say -7 is about right there. I'm just going to estimate. So I'm going to make a dot on top of the -7. And the +4, well, the distance from 0 to +4 is shorter than the distance from 0 to -7. So I'm going to say +4 is right here. And this is just an estimation. It's not perfect, but I know, I understand how the graph looks like. So I have my solution set right here, -7 and 4, and the graph of the solution. So that's what we need, two things, solution set and the graph. Now this one here, we have the absolute value of x plus 5 equals -3. Now first of all, you have to make sense of the problem. You have to understand the problem. We talked about the definition of absolute value. And if you go back to the beginning of the video and if you watch the first video, the absolute value is the distance of the number to the 0. So from 0 to whatever number they give you guys, that's going to be your absolute value, the distance. Now distance is positive. So the absolute value of any number has to be positive. Here, if you pay attention, we have the absolute value of x plus 5. I don't even know what the x is, but they say that the absolute value of this number is -3. Well, that's wrong, because the absolute value of any number has to be positive units, positive distance, positive number. So in this case, guys, this -3 is not the absolute value of that equation. So what that means, we do not have an answer. There is no solution for this absolute value. And I'm just going to circle the negative here because an absolute value cannot be negative. Now you can also use a symbol for no solution. So this symbol here, a 0, and then you cross it out, means the solution set is empty. There's no answer in the set. And you guys can also have absolute values with fractions. You are solving linear equations when you make your two cases, and there might be fractions in those absolute values. Now you guys have to pay attention. So let's go ahead and look at the actual equation. The absolute value 3/4a minus 3 equals to 9. Now this 9 is positive, so we're fine. That's okay. We can actually find the answer for this one. So let's go ahead and set up our positive case and our negative case. So one more time, guys, I set up what's inside of the absolute value 3/4a minus 3, and I make this number negative. That's my negative case. Positive case, you keep what's inside of the absolute value and you keep that number positive. That's why it's a positive case. So you guys need to solve those linear equations. From absolute values, we went to two linear equations. We have fractions, so we have to get rid of fractions. So I'm going to put the line underneath the equal sign. Denominator is 4 in that fraction, so I'm going to multiply everything by 4 so I can simplify, get rid of the fraction. So multiply 4, I multiply by 4, and 4 over here. So I can cross simplify. 4 goes into 4 one time, so you bring down the 3a minus 4 times 3, that's going to be 12. And on the other side, -9 times 4, that's -36. You guys are going to add 12 to both sides. That's your constant on the same side of the variable. So this cancels. So we have 3a on one side, and on the other side, we have 24. And it is a -24 because the biggest number is -36. So I'm going to put the negative right here. The next step, you guys are going to divide by 3. This turns into 1, so a equals -8. So that's one answer. The other answer, same thing, you have a fraction, so I'm going to multiply everything by 4 so I can get rid of fractions, times 4 and times 4. I'm going to simplify the 4 and the 4 here. So we have 3a minus 3 times 4 is 12. Let me bring down the line, and we get a positive 36 this time on the other side. You guys add 12 to both sides, and we know this cancels. Bring down the 3a, and we get 48 on the other side. You guys divide by 3, so we know this turns into positive 1. A equals 16. So my solution sets, we have two answers. One of them is -8, that's the smallest one, and the next one is positive 16. So you guys are going to plot those numbers on the number line. Now again, guys, you don't have to make the 1 units. You just have to estimate where the numbers will go. So I'm going to have my number line right here. Notice I'm using arrowheads and the 0 is in the middle. I'm going to say -8 is right here. So I'm going to put a point on the top, and 16 is on the right side because it is a positive 16. And I'm going to say 16 is way over here. It's really far away from the 0, 16 units away from the 0. So I'm going to put another point right here. Notice that the distance from -8 to 0 it's smaller than 0 to 16 because it is halfway. So it's just an estimation. Is it exact? No, guys, but it's just a way to make a quick graph of your solution. So we have two things again. Our solution set is negative 816, and our graph is a number line with the two circles, dark circles, or closed circles on top of the numbers. Now this example here is actually going backwards. We want to write an equation involving the absolute value for the graphs. So we don't want to find the solution. They actually give us the graph of the solutions. We have two number lines. The first one, you notice that we have a negative 4 with the circle and a positive 4 with the circle. And the second one, we have a negative 6 with the circle and a 2 with the circle. So this is what we have to do, guys, okay? When you guys want to find the equation, you want to write the equation, first you need to set up your absolute value equation. So I'm going to set up my absolute value right here and with the equal sign. Now inside of the absolute value you have to choose a variable to use. I'm just going to use m. Doesn't matter what variable you use. You guys can use x, y, p, a. I'm going to use m, and you guys will have a minus inside of the absolute value. That's how you start setting up your absolute value equation. You put your variable with a minus. Now here you guys need to find the midpoint right here in that empty space. You need to find the midpoint from negative 4 to positive 4. So what I mean is, what is the middle number from negative 4 to positive 4? And you guys can count. You guys can actually say, okay, from here, negative 4, 1 unit, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So halfway, which means divide by 2, will be your midpoint. That means half. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. So from any point, I'm going to say from this point, okay, I'm going to count 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one here is the midpoint right here. I'm just going to put the midpoint, or midway, you can say, of those two values, negative 4 and positive 4. So that number in this case is 0. You are going to put it in the empty spot inside of the absolute value. So I'm going to put a 0, m minus 0. Okay, so that's the midpoint. And let me just put a little note for you guys. Midpoint goes inside of the absolute value. Over here, you actually have to find the distance from the midpoint to one of the points. Doesn't matter which one. I'm going to use the right one. So the distance from 0 all the way to this point, it's actually 4 units. So that is the distance you are going to put after the equal sign. So I have 4. So I'm just going to put a little note for you guys here on top of the 4. And that is the note right there. That number represents the distance from the midpoint to any point. It can be the left side or the right side of the midpoint. Now you guys evaluate, or not so much evaluate, but simplify what's inside of the absolute value. M minus 0. 0 is nothing, so it just stays as m. So we have the absolute value of m equals 4. And that's the answer we're looking for. We want to write an absolute value equation representing that graph. The number line up here will have this absolute value equation. Now this one here, same thing. I'm going to start setting up my absolute value. So here's my absolute value with the equal sign. I'm going to use the variable x this time, x minus, and I have to find the midpoint of those 2 points. So I have a negative 6 and a positive 2. So let's go ahead and count. From negative 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units again. So halfway, you divide by 2 is going to be your midpoint. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. So from here, I'm going to count 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this right here is my midpoint. My midpoint is negative 2. So I am going to put that number, negative 2, right in the empty space. But guess what, guys? We have a negative and a negative next to each other. So I'm going to use parentheses because I need to separate those two negatives. And those are double negatives. So we have to be careful with those signs. So we do get double negatives. And then the number on the other side is going to be the distance from the midpoint to any points on that number line. So we have one on the right side, one on the left side. Doesn't matter which one. I'm going to use the left side. So the distance from the midpoint to the points is 4 units. And you guys can count from the midpoint, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to put a 4 after the equal sign. Now I am going to simplify this double negative, so that's going to turn positive. So I'm going to have the absolute value of x plus 2 equals 4. And that is my answer. So you guys, for this lesson, you guys need to understand absolute values, how to evaluate absolute values, how to solve absolute value equations, and also how to graph the solution when you guys find the value of the variables, and also how to write an absolute value equation. Alright guys, that's it for this video. If you guys like my videos, you guys can hit that like button. You can also subscribe to my channel, and make sure you guys practice, and I'll see you guys later.